16 years old, and I was going to get my first job. And I thought, well, it would be really great to work for a couple of months in the summer and have enough money to buy a van and travel around. I just got my driver's license. And I remember my mom saying, how are you going to buy a van? And I said, well, I'm going to earn some money, and I'm going to buy the van. And she says, well, you have to pay taxes on that money. How are you going to afford to buy the van? And I said, taxes for what? Well, you have to pay the government. And my thought, even as a child back then, was, what they do for me that I got to give them money? And my whole life, in the back of my head, although I became a good citizen, I paid my taxes, it didn't feel right. It wasn't until 1998, I was on my way to corporate America job, and I heard on the radio a gentleman in Cleveland, Ohio, talking about not paying taxes. This is the Irwin Schiff, don't pay your taxes era. A lot of you are aware of that movement. And that thought that I had as a child was reborn. And I thought, wow, maybe I was right. I don't need to pay taxes. And although I had the right mindset, like many of us, we jumped off the cliff and acted before we were fully informed on how to exercise our private rights. And I fought for several years to extinguish, I'm sure some of us are in that boat now, the tax liens and everything else the IRS slaps on you, and I lost my house due to complications of thereof. And that's when I decided, if I'm really going to be truly free, I have to understand those concepts. I have to be able to exercise the concepts of freedom. And those are not only being private, but they're also to embed the thoughts of being special, often missed. What is special and what is private? They're not secret, but they're definitely not general. All of the laws that we have in our land today are based upon the generalization that they apply to a group. Are any of us part of a group? A legal group, a political affiliation, a citizenship? You can volunteer to it, but there's nothing that mandates that. When we decide to be private and special, we take full control of our life. Absolute control. And we live with the decisions that we make, whether they be good or bad. That really makes it necessary to manage our own affairs, including what we possess, those being physical possessions as well as our rights. Jim alluded to that a little bit earlier. Are any of you aware of Rourke and his studies? We have a couple of hands here. He's probably the renowned expert on living with private trust. And I've studied a little bit of his world, but he well connected it with another gentleman to the Trading with the Enemy Act. Can I see by a show of hands how many people are aware of the Trading with the Enemy Act as it was modified by the Emergency Banking Relief Act? So it is the presumption that we are all enemies, rebels, and belligerents under the current occupation. I'd like to also add one other group there, that group being volunteers. Probably all of us here were at one time, and many of us still are, volunteers. What does that mean? We understand that there's a relationship in the gift that Jim was telling us about. When the Emergency Banking Relief Act came into play in 1933, it changed some very fundamental thoughts of ownership. One of those concepts was everything was vested in the state, to the point that even Black's Law Dictionary changed the definition of gift. In Black's 1 and 2, which occurred before 1933, a gift was any exchange for any purpose that was completed. After that, it was eliminated from the dictionary because a completed gift was no longer possible. We no longer had the right to own anything. Everything was vested in the state. And they did that by eliminating our ability to accept, to perfect the gift. How many, in a show of hands here, how many have currently or in the past owned a house? About half of us. How many of those signed the deed as grantee? Probably nobody, exactly. None of us accepted the gift. We did not perfect that title. That puts us in the status of a volunteer. We are now considered one of the rebels, belligerents, an enemy of the state. And as such, because the record shows that there's a grantee, but it never came forward to manifest itself on the record, the state steps in and manages that presumed abandoned property. So when they come and they take your house because you didn't pay your note, they have every right to do so. They're managing it. Your title shows that you're a tenant in common. You're paying property tax, not because it's for the services, but because it's for use of that property. They're managing. The grantee is missing. There's nothing on the record to show that he accepted the gift. We live, if we decide to live so in the private, must exist in exclusive equity. The principles of equity are based upon the maxim. One of those important two maxims is equity will not perfect an imperfect gift. So you have no rights in the private to your property because you never accepted the gift. Let that sink in a second. So we're all living in a world of imperfected titles and gifts. We consider them privileges, licenses, everything else, but they're simply because we didn't understand that we never took possession of that which is ours. We acquiesced to their authority because that's the way we were indoctrinated. That's the way the public fool system brought us up. So living in the private is not so much changing your life, but changing the way you view your life. You don't let things slide because that is the way the masses are doing it. You may have a requirement to get a driver's license, but do it on your terms. You may have a requirement to file a W-4 to your employer, but do it on your terms. If at the end of the year you get I believe I've been out of this for a while. What is the tax form that you get as an employee at the end of the year? W-7? W-2. Okay? There's a statement on there that's coming from the withholding agent, your employer, their best knowledge that what you earned was federally taxable. Did you acquiesce to that statement? Did you send your copy in with your tax return saying, yeah, that's taxable? Something as simple as saying, no, that's not taxable. This was my earnings, but it's not federally taxable. Because who's going to argue with you? You're the only one with the first-hand knowledge. If you don't correct the record, presumption stands. So being free is taking responsibility for your actions, or in this case, your inactions. If you're not going to correct the record, what happens? Their presumption stands. So, living in the private is difficult. I have a unique ability to diversify. As Jim well knows, I have a multitude of abilities, and because of that, I've been able to, some people may say, fly under the radar, work under the table, but I've never hidden my status since I've decided to be private. I work with people, and I let them know that I'm a little on the left, or a little on the right, but I'm not in the middle. I'm not general. I'm not public. I'm private and I'm special. I'm sure we've all been in court once or twice, or heard something to the effect, Oh, Mr. Smith, do you think you're above the law? Maybe intimidation. But let's not respond to them, but to ask them the question. Do you have any evidence that I'm within your law? Yes. How does that law apply to me? Can you state equivocally that your ordinance that you're trying to prosecute today applies to me? Do you have any first-hand evidence? If we're going to be sovereigns, we need to act as a king. We need to ask questions. So we are asking, as king, does this apply to me? If you don't make a statement, you're not committing to a particular answer. Let them offer up the evidence. There was a gentleman by the name of Brandon Adams. I don't know if any of you are aware of him. Creditors in Commerce. Yes. He made a few wrong turns, but in general, his information was very good, extraordinarily good. Did you have a question? Sorry. Can you all hear me in the back? Yes? Okay, good. Sorry about that. Jim has the one on his head. He actually brought some interesting facts to light and also assisted me with living privately. But one of the interesting concepts that he had is that, as Jim noted, our world of commerce is based upon one element that the government, the current occupants, let me start over there. Our current government has but one duty, and that duty is to maintain the peace. And everything they do is to that ends, as long as they are the occupying party, to maintain the peace. So when you look at anything that's happening in this world, this fictional world that we live in, it is to the ends of maintaining the peace. As private people, we need to take control of that. And that can only occur by us being responsible individually for our life and our interaction with this world. If we don't do that, we are volunteers. We acquiesce to their authority. Anyone have any specific questions about how living in the private might be? Do we have an extra mic we can pass back to a couple of people? No? I'll go to them then.
So you brought up something very interesting, and I actually have them in the car, and I need you to look at them when you get a chance. I just did 4 quitclaim deeds before I left Georgia. And the way that I did them was the wording, whatever, property description, so forth and so on. In the state of Georgia, you have to have a witness as well as a notary on your deed. But the way that the quitclaim deeds were done, the seller signed on one line. I handed him a silver bond, or her a silver bond. I signed on the second line. And then we had witnesses as well as the notary. So, should there have been verbiage of acceptance in there, or just my signing that particular deed on the quitclaim sufficient?
I'm not an expert on that particular subject, but I would presume that if the best evidence is that you signed as grantee and they accepted that on their public record, then, okay, but you would be acknowledging and perfecting your deed when that was recorded. You really don't want to register it. You want to record it.
Michael and Renata, and I failed to introduce some people. Renata is back here, and Michael, they're the two that rescued me from here whenever I came to South Carolina so abruptly and rudely, under the control of the Secret Service or the U.S. Marshals, back several years ago, and they were members, and really not even knew me, but took me in their home, and thank you. They've been great members and friends ever since. Michael is a very, very talented young man. He's been a huge part of helping us to get together our identifications, which we're going to talk about later. He knows a great deal about living private, about all of what we're doing here, and so we want to give him a couple words. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been knowing Jim a long time. Regretted ever since. I had my run-ins with the IRS in '96. Haven't paid taxes since. So, you know, this thing you gotta live or you gotta die and pay taxes, that's about all you gotta do. It's not really true. Now, as a volunteer, we have very little chance of doing some of the things that DJ just alluded to. It's a lot easier to do that with the proper status being recorded and everybody knowing where we're coming from. So the surrender docs are a great tool for that. But they're also not a silver bullet. With an increased level of freedom comes an increased level of responsibility. So if we hurt somebody physically or their property, we got to be able or got to make them whole. You know, you ask some people, everybody's talking about the reset and the reval, and just ask people what they're going to do with the money. And you'll be amazed what the answers are. Some of them really want to do stuff to advance humanity, which is why we're all here. Others want to buy a Ferrari. So the mentality is totally different, and it's really important to understand that by doing these things, we do accept a higher standard for ourselves and the responsibility that comes with it. And we're not or no longer representing just ourselves. That's how the sovereign movement got a real bad rap. But everyone in this room and other people out there, we all standing in the gap for them. They're going to be judged by what we do and how we conduct ourselves in public. And, you know, it's just some food for thought. Jim is going to take it a little farther with the IDs that we created. But again, that is not a silver bullet. The responsibility lies with us. And if we adhere to that and conduct ourselves accordingly, everything is going to just roll out fine. DJ alluded to the intent. If you form a trust, the intent of the settler is the law of the trust. So our intent is what carries the energy. And we don't want to nullify that by thoughtless behavior. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Michael.